Hello, and welcome to another 9-minute Bible study. Our starting point is the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, verse 1. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, verse 1. And let's read the verses. And Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan, and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted of the devil. And in those days he did eat nothing, and when they were ended, he afterward hungered. In the early part of Luke chapter 4, we read about the temptation of Jesus by the devil in the wilderness. Why is this so important? Why did Jesus have to be tempted of the devil in the wilderness? Well, let's start in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews, the second chapter. We're going to be reading the last two verses of the chapter. Hebrews chapter 2, the last two verses, which would be 17 and 18. Wherefore, in all things it behooved him to be made like unto his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself hath suffered being tempted, he is able to secure them that are tempted. Let's go back to verse 17. Wherefore in all things it behooved him, who is to him, Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. Behooved. That means it was in his best interest. So it is in the best interest of Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, to be what? Made like unto his brethren, meaning being a flesh and blood human being. In order to do what Jesus needed God to do, Jesus needed to be a flesh and blood human being. Let's keep going here. That he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people. That he might be a merciful. What is mercy? To show compassion on someone who does not deserve compassion. Jesus, in living here on earth, in going through everything that we go through, he is able to be merciful. Why? Because he knows what it is like. He knows what we go through. He knows the trials and the temptations that we face. And now, Jesus, because he's went through all of this, while he sits at the right hand of the Father, he can be our mediator. He can show mercy on us because he has been here and he knows what we go through. The next part, faithful. That means we can depend on him at all times. Jesus, he's full of mercy. He is full of faith, or dependable high priest. Jesus, he is our great high priest after the order of Melchizedek, which means that Jesus is on the right hand of the Father, both as king and as our great high priest. Why can we receive mercy? Because our great high priest is on the right hand of God the Father. And we know we can depend on him at all times. Why? Because he has been through all of this for our sake. The verse ends, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people. What Jesus did on the cross, in shedding his blood, in wiping out our sin debt, he reconciled or settled all the differences between us and God. With the differences settled, Jesus was raised from the dead and now sits on the right hand of the Father, doing this work of reconciliation. He is our go-between between us and the Father. The reason we can be in a relationship with the Father is because of the reconciliation work that Jesus did. Verse 18. For in that he himself hath suffered being tempted. Jesus, he was tempted with everything that we face here on earth. Everything. There was nothing that we face that he did not face in this life. Let's look at this. From the very beginning, birth, all the way to death, the last time he would face something that we went through. Jesus goes through all of this. And what happens? He passes all of these without failing. He suffered being tempted. He knows what it's like to be in our shoes. And because Jesus knows what it's like to be in our shoes, he is able to do what? Secure them that are tempted. Help them that are tempted. Why can Jesus help us? I mean, we can talk about everything else that claims to be a deity, but ultimately, they don't know what it's like to be human at all. Now, here is Jesus. He suffered. He knows what it's like to be tempted in all things. And because he knows what it is like to be tempted in all things, he is able to help us. What separates Jesus from everyone else? If you think about it, he is at the right hand of the Father, having experienced everything that we go through, yet without sin, and he is now able to help us. He pays the sin debt. He reconciled us to the Father. And now, because he is there, because he can help us, he can show mercy to us, and he can be dependable in all things. Believers in Jesus, what do we have as a foundation of faith? A Jesus who paid our sin debt, but not just that. A Jesus who is at the right hand of the Father. He is there because he went through everything we went through. He is there to show mercy. He is the one who pleads our case with the Father. He is dependable. He will always be there for us. No one else can make that claim. Only Jesus. That's why we can rest secure in what Jesus has done. And why we can rest secure is he is dependable in pleading our case to the Father. Jesus, he helps even right now. Just trust in him. And we'll pick up with this again in the next lesson.